and has learned about Ernie Nevers, realizes that there is some unbelievable thing.
Interest in pro football spread to
Sorry.
California, where a Stanford All-American.
Unbelievable thing about Ernie Nevers and Gene Sullivan. He never met Ernie, and he's exactly like him. Super intense. I found this every day. I get stuff from eBay, this notification about new stuff that's loaded. And I got this magazine article and I could not believe what I was reading. So I just wanted to make a little video about it because I thought it was so cool. Because anybody that knows and loves Gene Sullivan is blown away about how much he's like his father he never met. So this is from a magazine called Sport Magazine. And let's see, I'm not sure I wrote down the date, but I can put that on the title. And it's called Ernie Nevers Compulsion Incorporated. Nevers' unquenchable thirst for competition drove him to play every game to the hilt. It shortened his incredible three-sport career, but his record lives on. So that's kind of, if you knew everything about Gene Sullivan is intense. I think he's saved at least 5 or 10 people's lives. I mean, you hear his stories all the time about his intense life. I think his whole life would have been different had anybody ever known he was Ernie Nevers' son. But if you know anything about his history and sports history, you know that he was just as intense as Ernie. So I'm going to read this now. That gentleman, said the intense college football coach as he pointed to the Chicago Cardinal fullback, is how to play football. Every Sunday for 3 years, the coach took his Notre Dame football squad to Chicago to watch the fullback. The years were 1929 to 1931. The coach was KNUTE ROCKNE, and the fullback was Ernie Nevers. ROCKNE's admiration for Ernie Nevers had been born on the warm, sunny afternoon of January 1st, 1925, in the Rose Bowl. That day, the fullback, then a junior at Stanford University, single handedly almost beat the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame. Let's see here. Nevers' performance there is generally considered the most magnificent in the Rose Bowl history, yet Ernie Nevers played on what amounted to two broken legs. As KNUTE ROCKNE said after the game, what would that man have done if he'd been healthy? Ernie Nevers went on to be one of the most versatile athletes of all time, competing professionally in three major league sports. He played fullback 5 seasons in the National Football League, first with with the Duluth Eskimos. They actually called him the Ernie Nevers Eskimos. Then with the Chicago Cardinals. He pitched 3 seasons for the St. Louis Browns of the All-American League, and he played basketball for Chicago in the forerunner of the National Basketball Association. On the West Coast, Ernie Nevers is considered the area's greatest all-around athlete in history. Glenn Scobie, Pop Warner, went even further. In the twilight of his life, Pop Warner frequently was asked who was the best athlete he ever saw in his half century of coaching. Invariably, he said Ernie Nevers. Better than Jim Thorpe? Pop Warner was asked. And the man who had coached Thorpe at the Carlisle School for Indians said, better than Jim Thorpe. Ernie Nevers could do anything Thorpe could do, many things that Thorpe couldn't do, and always was trying harder than Thorpe ever did. What's amazing is,
40 points.
whoops,
At the end of that season,
sorry
George
about
Halas
that.
decided he would no longer be.
There's all kinds of movies and documentaries about Jim Thorpe, and I really think that Ernie was a better athlete. It's really bizarre how he kind of didn't ever make it on a much more famous level like this Jim Thorpe, because a lot of people thought he was a better player, but Jim Thorpe has all kinds of movies and documentaries and stuff about him, and Ernie Nevers has very little at all. So it's kind of odd. It's kind of what's happened to Gene in some ways. But so there is support for Warner's verdict on Nevers. He still is listed on many of the all-time All-American teams, and the National Football League, where Nevers set 6 records, and Ernie has Ernie on its all-time team. Ernie Nevers reached heroic proportions in the golden age of sports and earned a fortune. The year Nevers played in the Rose Bowl, Babe Ruth was paid $52,000 by the New York Yankees, and Red Grange signed a pro football contract for an estimated $15,000. In 1926, Ernie Nevers was paid $60,000 for competing in football, baseball, and basketball. He was a powerful fullback, a blazing fastball pitcher, and he very likely introduced the overhead hook shot to basketball. His strong 205-pound, 6-foot, 1-inch body had wide, thick shoulders that hunched just a little, as though they were always cradling a football in his thick-wristed arms. If you know Gene, that is him too. So he also had grace, agility, and reactions so swift that they were almost spontaneous. So that's a bit like his son also. He had one more natural gift, perhaps the most important one. Pop Warner labeled it when he said Ernie Nevers tried harder than Jim Thorpe. Ernie had an unquenchable thirst for competition. He lived to, got to pull up the next page here. He lived to compete in any game, any time, and he played each one though it was like his last. Just like his son there is like that too. So there are 3 stories clearly reveal the sports fervor that burned within Ernie Nevers. They illustrate how Nevers gave himself so completely that by refusing to let up, he shortened his athletic career. The first story concerns Nevers' rookie pro football season with the Duluth Eskimos. To capitalize on his name, the Eskimos went on the road. They traveled all over the country for almost 4 months and played 29 games for a total of 1740 minutes of football. Ernie Nevers played all but 7 of those minutes. Grantland Rice called him the Iron Man of football. The second story involves a football game that lives in the hearts rather than in record books. One year, Nevers adopted a hometown of Santa Rosa, California, set aside 2 days to honor him. Driving into town, Ernie saw a group of youngsters playing football in an empty parking lot. Parking, he got out to watch. Within minutes, he was in the game himself. Within another few minutes, he was stretched out on the ground with 2 black eyes and a sprained wrist, knocked down by moppets. He wouldn't risk hurting by bruising them aside. Teased unmercifully at the banquet in his honor that night, Nevers said thoughtfully, "Well, I tell you, we all had fun, and it was a game we'll always remember. Doesn't that make it worthwhile?" The third story developed in 1931 when Nevers helped promote a game between an NFL, a team of pro all-stars, and the NFL champion Green Bay Packers. Got to go to the next page. In San Francisco's Kezar Stadium, the Nevers All-Stars were early and decisive winners, and subtitles flooded both lineups to run out the clock. But Ernie remained the all-star backfield. In the last seconds, a Packer knocked Ernie Nevers' heels over helmet, with Ernie writhered on the turf with a cracked ankle bone. "Why, Ernie?" a friend wailed in the dressing room. "Why were you still in there risking exactly what happened when it was so unnecessary?" Nevers bowed his blonde head sheepishly, but his words were strong. "Well," he said, "the game wasn't over yet, and it was promoted as the Ernie Nevers All-Star, so every fan who paid to watch it had the right to see me in action as long as I could stand on my feet." Anyway, Ernie looked up earnestly. "I wanted to play some more." This love of competition helps explain an unfortunate pattern to Nevers' career. He always wound up on teams that had little chance of succeeding, either on the field or at the box office. This unquestionably stripped Nevers of much opportunity and recognition. One can only wonder how far he might have gone playing with good teams. I once asked Ernie why he chose to play with ragtag teams. Well, he says slowly, my best offers came from those teams. They needed help and they were willing to pay for it. Wouldn't you have been ahead in the long run, taking a little less money in exchange for the security of being on a team that had a financial future? To say nothing of being with a team that had a chance of winning? Oh, I like to win, Nevers said, but I'd much rather win with a team that supposedly didn't have a chance than with a team that has everything stacked in its favor. Do you mean to say, I asked incredulously, that you preferred pitching for the hopeless Browns rather than the Babe Ruth Yankees? I would never consider my team as hopeless, Nevers said sharply. Then he added, almost plaintively, doggone it, the whole idea of sports is competition. Where can you find greater competition than with an underdog team? In effect, you could consider the competition of the sport more important than your own reputation or financial future. Well, I never spelled it out quite like that, but I guess that's it. I simply can't ease up. I still can't. When I see a hurdle, he said, I can't take the easy, comfortable way around it. I have to try to jump over it, that hurdle, just to see if I can do it. Ernest Alonzo Nevers was a competitor from his earliest days in northeastern Minnesota, where he was born on June 11th, 1903. His competitive urge bloomed when his family moved to a suburb of Superior, Wisconsin in high school. Ernie saw football and basketball for the first time and immediately embraced both. Well, let's see, where am I? Sorry about that. Took my eyes off my page here. Oh. Sorry, I'll have to put up with my little problems here. Let's see. His family moved. By the second year, he captained the football and the basketball teams. One afternoon in basketball practice, as a guard pressed him closely, Nevers instinctively wheeled sideways over the basket and swept his right arm over his head and stretched the ball right through the hoop. Thereafter, he perfected the shot as he scored more and more points with his opponent, and then his opponents copied it. Ernie Nevers believes he was the first player. Sorry, I got to switch the page here. 3. The first player to, this page is a little smaller, so hang in there with me. Yeah, he believes he was the first player to ever use the hook shot. And he's noted for that in several other manuals and sports journals. So just before Ernie's senior year, his family moved to Santa Rosa, California. He promptly led Santa Rosa to the state high school basketball championship. He returned to the Superior to graduate with his classmates there and led the Superior basketball team to the state championship. 2 titles in 2 sports in 2 states in the same athletic year. Ernie entered Stanford University in September of 1922. As a freshman, he competed in football, basketball, baseball, and track. Being on both the baseball and track teams posed a problem. It came to a head in April one afternoon. Nevers was due to pitch at the same hour the track team had a meet. Nevers frowned thoughtfully as he pulled on a baseball uniform and spikes in the Stanford gymnasium. But as he warmed up to pitch, the worried frown disappeared. He had found a solution if it worked. He struck out the side in the first inning. Then he sprinted from the mound and ran to the track stadium a few hundred yards away. The judge had just shouted, "Last call for the discus," as breathless Ernie stopped short before him. Nevers, the two-headed freshman, panted. The judge looked at him in amazement. "Do you mean to say you plan to throw the discus in a basketball uniform?" Oh, sorry. And let's see. "Yes, sir, if there's no rule against it," said Nevers, "and I may have an early..." Sorry, my computer went out. "Yes, sir. And if there's no rule against it," Nevers said, "and I may have an early throw, I have to get back to the baseball game, so can I throw early?" The judge shrugged indulgently. "Sure, go ahead if you think you can." Taking a deep breath, Ernie whirled and spun out his discus. He didn't wait to see where it landed. He was back at the baseball diamond just in time to bat. Baseball coach Harry Wilter, who had been frantically searching for Nevers, issued a spot ultimatum. "Make your choice, baseball or track, but not both." Nevers chose baseball, much to the chagrin of the Stanford track coach. The discus Nevers had thrown without warm-up and in a baseball uniform and spikes had sailed far enough to win third place. After 3 years of baseball at Stanford, Ernie was named to the all-time university team. He had searing fastball and he had a searing fastball and a sharp curve. He also batted over 400 and played right field when he wasn't pitching. So, on the Stanford basketball court, Nevers used his reflexes, agility, and strength to advantage. College basketball in the 1920s had few of today's refinements. The rules then protected the player with the ball. Any defensive man who made contact was at fault, not the dribbler. There was a good deal of football in basketball, which was right down Ernie's court. Oops, sorry. I gotta turn that volume down. Sorry about that. Basketball court. Okay, let's see. In one game at USC, player Gordon Campbell dribbled down court and imprudently knocked Nevers aside. Ernie got up, trotted to the sidelines, and called to the official scorer, Don Lebendorfer, sitting 3 rows back in the stands. "Watch yourself, Don. I'm going to knock that guy right in front of your lap first chance I get." Moments later, as Landorfenberg bent over his scorer's sheet, he was smashed down by a hurtling body. Leibendorfer gingerly pried himself free of the inert Gordon Campbell. Ernie Nevers is listed by present sports publicity director Lebenforth as one of the two finest basketball players in Stanford's history. The other is Angelo Hank Lucetti, but football was Ernie Nevers' forte. As a sophomore, he played halfback on offense and end on defense. Pop Warner replaced Annie Kerr as head coach when Ernie Nevers was a junior. Warner took one look at Nevers and told him, "You're going to play deep man in my double wing. Brush up on your passing and kicking. You'll be doing most of it." Nevers was overjoyed. This was what he'd always wanted and had worked hard to meet the test. And, you know, Gene was an unbelievable passer and an unbelievable kicker too. In signal drills, he ran every play as though it were against a real opponent. He refused to smoke, drink, or even date. He dedicated himself to football. However, his dedication and high hopes received a shocking setback. In a preseason scrimmage against the Naval team, Nevers' cleat caught in a turf just as a tackler slammed him. Nevers' left ankle was broken. He was sidelined until the season's next to last game against Montana. In a pipeline during the opening moments, a Montanan fell heavily on Nevers' right ankle, and it too snapped. Even without, trying to get to this whole article here. Even without Stanford's veteran the strong team won 7 games, tied 1, and was selected to represent the West Coast in the Rose Bowl, Knute Rockne's Four Horsemen. And 7 mules represented, what's really crazy about that is one of my relatives on my side of my family actually played Ernie Nevers in this very football game. Baffling small world, isn't it? So the 7 mules at the Notre Dame game accepted the Rose Bowl invitation. 2 days before the game, Nevers' right ankle was still in a cast. 5 days before the game, Pop Warner rummaged in his garage and put together a makeshift, I can't read the word, trusses for both broken legs. And Nevers hobbled onto the practice field for his first signal drill. Ernie limped painfully as his timing was badly off. It failed to improve much before the afternoon of January 1st, 1925. On that afternoon, Ernie Nevers spent the last minute before kickoff getting his legs taped up and trussed. In the opposing dressing room, Knute Rockne was giving one of his patented fight talks, although in this case, the fight talk seemed a waste of time and Rockne's breath. Without Ernie Nevers, Stanford didn't have a chance. Pop Warner thought that too. He sighed. Then he spoke to his fullback. "We're due on the field, Ernie." Pop said, "Think you can make it?" "Sure, Coach," Nevers said. "I'll play." Warnie looked at the determination in Nevers' ruddy face. The coach turned to the trainer and said, "Maybe he will do that." Ernie Nevers played 60 minutes. It was a performance unequaled in the Rose Bowl ever. Sports writer Maxwell Stiles reported Nevers' game in non-stop superlatives. The point I'm trying to make, he wrote, is that nobody ever saw anybody exhibit greater individual prowess than is displayed by Ernie Nevers against Notre Dame. Not only does the great fullback stand out magnificently as a line smasher, wow, he is a line pulverizer and a passer whose spirals usually are straight and fast and true. He also seems to be making about 4 out of 5 tackles made by Stanford. Also, his pass defense is good and his intercepts won to start Stanford on its way to a third period touchdown. Throughout the rest of the game, Nevers is a crashing wild man in a large red sweater. Notre Dame won that game 27-10, but Ernie Nevers playing, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. Nevers played every game. I'm sorry, I lost that place. Okay, large red sweater here. Notre Dame won the game 27-10, but Ernie Nevers playing on the 2 taped up broken legs with feeling sealed off from the knees down was the individual star. He actually was the player of the whole game, not one of the winners on the other side of the team. So he carried the ball on 34 of Stanford's 45 rushing plays, and the total carries and remains as a Rose Bowl record. He had gained 114 of Stanford's 174 net yards for scrimmage. The Four Horsemen carried the ball 38 times for a net total of 127 yards. Nevers played every game of his senior year. There were games he seemed to be the entire team against Oregon, Santa Clara, Montana, Washington. In game after game, Nevers was given the ball 3, 4, and 5 times in a row to pound into the line for a first touchdown or a touchdown. Certainly, Ernie had power, and he also would be running at top speed within 2 steps. Pop Warner said later, but what got to him through those lines stacked to meet him when he was the most amazing reflexes I've ever seen in a man. Ernie could spot an opening and instantaneously shift or cut to slice through that opening. So instead of 2 yards, he'd gain 11. Professional football, working to establish a firm foundation by luring the biggest college football stars, rushed to Ernie with open wallets. Okay, I got to take another little break here for the last page. Foregoing his final semester at Stanford, Nevers signed for a horn plenty $25,000 in cash and the promise of 10% of the gate receipts of 2 all-star games in Jacksonville, Florida against Tim Mara's New York Giants. The game was a sellout and Ernie could have grossed $55,000, but a ticket manager skipped out with most of the gate receipts, including the $30,000 of Nevers cut. The ticket manager was never caught. Ernie also signed a football contract with Olof Hugstrud of the Duluth Eskimos for $20,000 a year. Few football players are paid more today. And I think when you look back at the time, it was a huge amount of money in the 20s. So baseball and basketball added to Nevers' bonanza. The St. Louis Browns gave him $10,000 bonus and a yearly salary of $7,000 in 1926. In pro basketball, players passed the hat at halftime and were pleased if they could collect $10 a man. Nevers was guaranteed $300 a game by Chicago, and he played 6 before leaving the Browns training camp. He spent most of 3 seasons in the American League, appearing in 45 games, winning 6 and losing 12. In 1928, he reported to the St. Louis training camp with a football injury. He had 2 broken ribs, and one of them pressed against a nerve in his back so tortuously that every movement was agonizing. Nevers pitched in 6 games for the Browns, but his fastball had lost its hop. He just couldn't use his good motion. St. Louis manager George Sisler reluctantly sent him down to the Mission Reds, the Browns' San Francisco farm team. Unknown to Ernie, the Mission Reds had scheduled him to pitch on the day of his arrival, and the San Franciscans bought out the stadium to welcome home their hero. Nevers reached San Francisco the morning of the game, hoping for rest and treatment for his back injury. He read with dread in the morning paper that he was pitching that afternoon, but his fierce pride flamed. It hurt even to lift my arm, Nevers said today, but if the people of my hometown were that glad to see me come back, I decided the least I could do was pitch. Every pitch sent a searing, stabbing pain through his body, and Ernie Nevers faced glistening with sweat. His one-time fastball limped to the plate, but Ernie Nevers drew on courage, lasted on control. He went 9 innings, threw a 4-hitter, and was beaten 1-0. But his intimates call it Ernie Nevers' greatest baseball game. It was also virtually his last baseball game. The back alignment continued to plague him. His effectiveness lessened, and the Mission Reds released him. The constant pain also forced Nevers to give up playing football. He took an assistant coaching job at Stanford University. Then, on a trip to Los Angeles, he was introduced to an osteopath, and the chance meeting became his salvation. The doctor relieved him of the pressure in his back nerve, and Nevers returned to professional football and additional NFL records. He set 5 of his 6 league records. I didn't know that either. 6 NFL records. In his first season with Duluth, the records in running and passing and kicking are a document to Nevers' amazing versatility. And again, anybody that knows Gene Sullivan, it's like reading about him if he had ever made it on a football field with the pros. He had 2 of his knees blow out, or he would have been right behind dear old dad. One of those Duluth records still stands, although it was equaled by Bob Waterfield in the Los Angeles Rams. Ernie Nevers, playing against Hartford, place kicked 5 field goals of 42, 21, 28, 26, and 25 yards for a 15-0 victory. Again, if only the San Francisco 49ers and the other San Francisco team, I think, if they had known that the guy that had his knees blown out was Ernie Nevers' son, they would have definitely doctored him up and let him try out another day. It's just fate and it's just fate, God's fate in Gene Sullivan's life, that nobody knew who he was. His high school coaches would have been a lot nicer to him too. So in Milwaukee, back to Ernie here. In Milwaukee, with only seconds left to play, Nevers feinted a line plunge and dropped back to his own 38. He was rushed hard, but he got away a perfect pass, a record 62 yards on the fly to Joe Rooney in the end zone. It won the game 7-6. Against Pottsville's, Nevers completed 17 consecutive passes for 27 points and an NFL record. However, his proudest record came on line plunging. Duluth played the Giants in late October at the Polo Grounds in New York. In 7 games before meeting Duluth, the Giants had held 3 opponents scoreless and given up only 1 touchdown to each of the others. The Giants scored in the first quarter against Duluth, and the second period opened. They were driving to another touchdown, but floating to his right from his linebacker spot, Ernie Nevers picked off a New York pass on his 45 to stop the threat. In the huddle, Nevers said, "All right, let's get him back. Let me start at it." He took the center pass and sliced inside the tackle, cutting to his right, then downfield for 11 yards before a giant halfback dropped him. On the next play, he smashed at left tackle for 4 yards. The third play, Nevers again off the left tackle, 3 yards. The Giants were bracing against him. Nevers panted as he leaned into the huddle. "Give me the ball again," he said. Johnny Bled looked up quickly. "You can't do it, Ernie. They're stacked for you. Anyway, you need to rest." "Give me that ball," Nevers said. Sorry, I had to fix my computer there. "Give me that ball," Nevers said. Let me find that. The Giants packed tight in the line, straining shoulder to shoulder, and the defensive backs were poised right behind them. There was no subtlety now. The Giants knew what was coming. It was power against power. Ernie Nevers drove toward the Giants' right tackle, but a step from the line, he saw the Giant right guard slide off a block, angling toward the tackle to meet him. In the flick of a second, Nevers cut behind the sliding guard and through a hole. A halfback sprinted into the plug the gap. Ernie lowered his head, belted the halfback, and bowled into the end zone for 9 straight plays. Ernie Nevers had carried the ball into the toughest line in professional football for 55 yards and a pro record. Duluth lost the game 14-13, but not because of Ernie Nevers. In the same year, in 1926, Ernie Nevers and Jim Thorpe met for the only time. The Eskimos invaded Canton, where Thorpe, on legs that were weary as he moved into his 40s, was playing on courage alone. As it turned out, Nevers said now, it was Thorpe's last year in pro football. Probably, he suspected, it would be in any event. He wanted to show the fans and me that he still had something left. He surely did. I dropped back to receive a punt. Sorry, this magazine is really old. Just as I reached up to catch the ball, Jim Thorpe hit me in the chest. I felt as though I was being pile driven 3 feet into the ground. I've never before or since been hit so hard. When Nevers returned from his back injury to pro football in 1929, let's see here, the Duluth franchise had been sold and Ernie's contract peddled to the Chicago Cardinals. Nevers joined the Cards as a player coach, the only player head coach in NFL history. Nevers added another footnote to the pro football history that year. He took the Cards to an out-of-town training camp, the first such camp for an NFL team. I want to go back here on this a little. Sorry. So he is the first one to ever start those football camps, right? He actually, I've read a lot about him, came up with rules, stuff. He was a big influence in a lot of ways in professional football with ideas of what to do even after he left football. He had a big influence in the football arena with suggestions and ideas that they actually took up. But where am I here? Head coach. He was the only head coach that actually was playing while he was head coach, right? So, except for a brief filing as head coach as an All-American Football Conference Chicago Rockets in 1946, Ernie Nevers was out of athletics to stay. But he followed his philosophy of disdaining the easy, comfortable way. During World War II, he was offered a commission to work stateside in the Navy's physical training program. Ernie refused, enlisted as a private in the Marines, and served with the torpedo bomber squadron in Bougainville and other South Pacific combat points. In business after the war, Nevers consistently refused well-paying propositions to make use of his name. If I can't do something worthwhile to earn my salary, he says, I want no part of it. Just as in sports, I want to do my best so I can face myself in the morning when I shave. There's Gene Sullivan too. Man, son's just like him there. Ernie never, if you only knew the story, sorry, of where Gene went down the road of integrity instead of money, you'd know what I'm talking about. So Ernie Nevers lives quietly in Trubron now, across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco with his wife Marjorie and his 13-year-old daughter Ernestine. At age 58, Ernie's hair is still blonde, tasseled, unthinned by the years. His weight is only 12 pounds more than when he cracked football lines in the 20s, and he still hunches a little as though he were cradling a football in his powerful arms. And his bright flame of competition is only banked. Man, I got a woodpecker on my wall out there. I got to go shoot a gun at it. I'm sorry. And his bright flame of competition is only banked As he watches high school, college, and professional football games, Ernie Nevers' eyes glisten as he says softly, "Boy, what I'd give to be 30 years younger." If he were any college coach, might well take him to watch Ernie Nevers and say again, that gentleman, I'm sorry, I want to back up on that because this is really deep. This is how it starts with Pop Warner taking his football team to watch Ernie Nevers play as their Sunday football lesson, right? If he were any college coach, if he were any college coach, might well take him to watch Ernie Nevers and say again, that, gentlemen, is how to play football.